Welcome to Jargon, a podcast bringing clarity to commonly misunderstood business concepts. We're debunking and simplifying the buzzwords and ideas plaguing today's business world and offering a fresh perspective on these topics. Good afternoon. This is Peter Purcell.
And I'm Bill Imany. We're here for another podcast. Welcome and appreciate you guys listening. Hey, Peter, you had mentioned you read an article the other day about something that was all too familiar. Tell me about it.
Well, yeah, I read an article about business operating systems, and I thought for a minute there, were they talking about a new operating system for a laptop or something like that? Is this new software or something? So I started going down a rabbit trail, and I've read a series of articles about it, and I realized, hey, we do this all the time, and we've been doing this, Bill, for as long as you and I have worked together. So I thought I'd corner you today and ask you a few questions about it.
Well, doing what exactly?
Well, doing business operating systems.
Oh, so helping our clients implement
implementing them. And I think what we do and what the articles don't really hit on very much is what's the value? Why do you actually do it? How do you do it? And then how do you keep it consistent? And so since now we've set the stage, used a lot of jargon, Bill, why don't you help us with defining it, telling us what the value is, and then let's kind of talk through some of the tools and techniques that we've used and left behind oftentimes with our clients, keep it repeatable.
Yeah, so you threw out this term called business operating system, and it's a relatively new term, but it's been around a long time, and we've been doing it. We might have called it company management system. We might have called it business process optimization. We might have had different names for it over the years, but some of the consultants have come out with, and that's why we have this jargon podcast to break down these jargony words
right.
Like business operating system and what is it? And essentially, it's basically, I'll call it an operating model where you take the company mission, vision, and strategy and take it down to, I'll call it a business function or a departmental level, where you can tie that business strategy and objectives to a consistent way of doing business at a tactical departmental level. So really it gives some crunch to your vision and how you operate to start with. That's the first component of it, Peter. The real big piece of it is it's almost like a toolkit of how do you operate as a company to be consistent, have a consistent way of doing things within the company. All too often, the norms and the way people do things in a company are morphed out of individual leadership capabilities. So the finance organization might develop a set of norms while the IT department develops a different set of norms, and they completely operate against each other. Maybe the finance organization has a way of doing business and a culture that's very meticulous and I'll call it more parochial in their thought process, while the IT organization might be a group of entrepreneurial type spirit. But how do I get that consistency across the company?
You're always so nice to us IT guys. But I hear what you say, and you're talking about two fairly disparate organizations. You know, I would assume that not having a good business operating system or the standard operating model becomes even a little bit more challenging when you have two functions that are fairly similar to each other. So they're being repetitive, they're both doing the same things, but maybe slightly different, and that creates inconsistencies.
Yeah, so let's talk about why do you do a business operating system? It's not just creating consistency for the sake of a consistency. That achieves no end right there. That just means everybody's the same. And we certainly don't advocate that for no other purpose than just make everything the same. But really, what we're getting at here is how do you have an operating model where you're efficient? How do you maximize efficiency as an organization? How do you drive collaboration so that you don't have duplication of effort? And then how do you make sure that you can achieve some level of scalability? So any organization out there would likely admit they do want to grow and they want to scale their business. Well, if everybody's operating independently and not collaboratively in a similar manner, that scalability starts to get inhibited. And usually that scalability is inhibited by the weakest link in the organization.
Right. Now, I think clear roles and responsibilities, obviously would fall into that, as well as making sure that everything that you're doing has some tie to strategic value. You don't want to be doing, or, I say strategic value is a lofty word, but just value.
Or driving a positive cash flow.
Exactly. And that's what I mean, is you want every function and every person to be operating to the benefit of the company, benefit of your clients, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, right. So as you're saying, Peter, so the real question is what does a business operating system do? We just talked about what it addresses, But that business operating system isn't necessarily, we use the word system, it's not a computer program, it's not a replacement for ERP, it's not your CRM, it's basically how do you operate. It's the way that you connect your company mission, vision, and values down to at a department level, but then you set guidelines on how your department needs to run and how you operate. And then really it becomes, as you said, a set of processes, systems, and roles and responsibilities that all fold into it. So that's what it is. Now, I know what your next question is going to be.
How do we get there?
How do you get there?
How do we get there, and how do we get there quickly, and how do we get there in such a way that, the faster we get there, obviously you're going to leave gaps and potentially low-hanging fruit, but how do you go back once you've gotten to where you think you should be? How do you get into that kind of continuous improvement mindset?
Yeah, no, good question, Peter. And really the first thing is taking what you have already. So most organizations have mission, vision, and goals and what they are. So starting with your mission, vision, and goals. We're not talking about changing it, but taking what already exists today, to be true. It's on your website. It's on it's in the boardroom. It's on the hallway. It's in everybody's mind. This is the mission of the organization. These are our goals. This is why we exist. Taking a look at your performance metrics, understanding what those are, and having consensus on that. Most organizations know whether it's EBITDA or whether it's inventory turns, what are your performance metrics that drive success of your company? And then the third piece of it is understanding where your capabilities are. And so you might say, I've got these mission, vision, and goals, but there may be some things that are inhibiting you guys from getting there. But knowing at a macro level, where are your weaknesses? Where are your strengths? And sometimes companies have done SWOT analysis where they look at their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Some organizations have done even surveys where they've surveyed their customers or surveyed people internally and understood where their capabilities really lie. Or they might even done some sort of maturity model assessment and said, these are our processes that are mature. Might have come out of an audit, may have come out of some internal work that you've done internally as a company, but really starting out with those inputs at a corporate level and that's the first step. Corporate level, mission, vision, metrics, and your capabilities. Those three things. That's your starting point. That really gives you the foundation to then go build a business operating system.
And actually, I would think that, if we were to take a long, hard look in the mirror, a lot of people, even though you say your mission values and goals and your performance metrics should be in everybody's mind, in the day-to-day firefighting, oftentimes those things just go out the window. So a step back to reestablish those and recommunicate those is always useful, even outside of the context of what we're talking about, I would assume.
Well, yeah, and so many times people say, you need to recommunicate it. And the real point of a business operating system is to build a process whereby it is communicated. So what I'm getting at is most companies, when we walk in the door, they already have those things. And then they're going, how do I build a business operating? We have these things. Yeah, we've communicated them. Yeah, we've done that. We've sent emails out. People don't read them, or people do read them, and they stick with some parts of the organization while others don't because they're getting busy. The reality is this business operating system is a model for whereby you can accomplish what you just described.
Okay. So let's get into department business operating system. What does it kind of consist of, and how do we get there?
Yeah. So really, when we look at a business operating system, we look at it in terms of 6 key deliverables that come out of a business operating system, and we'll dive into each of those 6. But again, we have some articles posted out there on our website that describe these, so you don't have to memorize the 6 as you're listening to this or driving to work. You can also, we'll be coming out with a handbook later in the month that will go through each of these and help companies, if they decide to do it themselves, to kind of address this on their own.
Okay. So, and for our listeners, the way the handbook works is, I do some editing. Bill completely trashes it, and it's always better when he's done with it.
So actually, our marketing department trashes it and then rewrites it and tells us how it needs to look.
Okay,
so,
there we go. All right, so let's hit the 6 points, Bill. What are they?
So the first point is guiding principles.
Okay.
And we look at this from a departmental perspective, taking your mission, vision, and values as a corporate level, but in a departmental perspective, what are our guiding principles? And how are we going to operate as a team? So, for example, let's say for an IT organization, guiding principle might be we're going to be customer-centric and customer-focused. A finance organization might say we're going to put accuracy over precision. And I'm making a knock on accountants right there who tend to want to be precise, but really it's about being accurate. So what are the things that drive decisions and what's important what's not important. So really those guiding principles set forth, what do you stand for, what are you there for, and why do you exist as a department?
Right. And even at a guiding principles level, and I know I may be hitting on the next thing that you're going to talk about, but it also, your guiding principles, you could even have some around specific operations or, how you're going to interact with other departments and the like, right? I mean, so when you look at those guiding principles, they can be somewhat broad, for lack of a better term.
Yes, they can. And they could be more at a level of saying the operations team is going to be, or say it's engineering and technical support, is going to have immediate response to the field.
Right.
And we're going to prioritize safety above everything else.
Right. Okay.
And those tie typically back to something corporate level, but at a operational level, they might tie specific to them. Your sales team might have guiding principles around, we're not chasing everything that moves. We're going to focus on high margin, high growth companies. So what's our focus? So that's guiding principles the first.
So that's first thing. What's the second? I can guess, but I'll let you go.
Well, I won't make you guess.
Well, I know.
Process improvement vision. And so really what this is taking your business processes, breaking them down and for a process focus. So you start at the top and you say, okay, we've got our company-wide process, and then beneath that you got your procurement process, order to cash process, bid to bill, et cetera, et cetera. All those processes, breaking them down into sub-processes, and then being able to look at each of those sub-processes and say, what's our vision for that process? How good do we want to be at doing that? So for example, you might say, from a customer relationship management perspective, we want to have systems in place and processes in place to track every single lead and opportunity we have out there. Versus another area, you might say, well, you know what, from a pricing perspective, we want to have flexible pricing that's customized for our customers. Or you might say, we're going to have standardized pricing across all of our customers. What are the things that, from a process improvement perspective, you seek to make each of those business processes the most efficient as possible? What leading practices do you want to have in place for the future of your organization? So it's not just what capabilities you have today, but what do you want to have in the future? How good do you want to be at planning and forecasting?
Right.
How good do you want to be from a sales perspective or quality perspective? What are those leading practices you want to put in place? And you put those down in a process improvement vision that's very down to a department level.
Okay.
Okay.
So once you do that, now I have my process improvement vision. What do I do next? Now do I need to figure out who's going to do what?
Well, part of the process, I don't want to leave this out, is making sure it's communicated across departments. So the departments get together and they share with each other what those are to make sure there's not any inconsistencies.
Right. So everybody understands kind of what's critical to quality for everybody else.
Exactly.
Right. So I just Lean Six Sigma right there. Yeah.
So the third piece of this is what we call a RACI. And I think a lot of folks have heard that term before, but just to re-communicate, it's R is for responsible, A, accountable, C, consult, and I is for informed.
Yeah, and for those frequent listeners, even when Bill's not here, I think we've talked about RACIs in probably the last 5 podcasts in a row, maybe, with the exception of the one that you just did with Todd.
Yeah, probably so.
But no, these were, we were trying to get other voices in here. We have talked about a RACI a lot.
Gotcha.
So,
but you can go back to those podcasts and listen to those. Right. But essentially, it's being able to define what everybody's role is as it relates to all the processes. So in that process improvement vision, you've listed out all your sub-processes that that's important to the company. Then being able to take those and to kind of imagine a big old matrix of all the processes going down the left-hand side and across the top, all the people or departments in the organization going across the top and defining who's accountable for each of those processes. So, for example, it becomes a real challenge in organizations that are matrix structured,
right,
where they might have multiple people accountable for something, and that's where you get into trouble. It's who's the single person accountable for planning our sales forecast? Who's the single person accountable for delivering our sales
forecast?
And who's actually responsible for selling? Who's responsible for our marketing efforts? All those things, making sure there's the right people are accountable and responsible, and the right people are involved in the process to make sure there's no duplication of effort, and 2 people don't think they both own the same thing. And that's where a lot of organizational changes start coming out of this. When you start looking at your business operating system in terms of roles, responsibilities, and clarifying them between different departments. So for the finance organization to sit down with the sales team and say, okay, this is your role in the S&OP process. This is our role in the S&OP process, and making sure everybody's aligned and agrees and there's some accountability there.
Okay, so I got to do a jargon check on you, S&OP.
Sales and operations planning. Excuse me.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay.
I very rarely get you, but I got you. So understand the RACI. So now we've got our guiding principles. We kind of understand what our future state processes are and our visions. So kind of our North Stars, if you will. And then we're understanding who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed. So how do we keep them all accountable, though, to make sure that they're sticking to that RACI, they're doing the right things at the right time?
Man, I'm glad you asked that question because I was hoping for a good lead in and you just set it up there. How do I hold people?
I read upside down, Bill.
I measure measurement. It's performance metrics.
Yeah, okay.
You've got company-wide performance metrics. Then if you start thinking about what performance metrics impact those company-wide ones, there's typically departmental level performance metrics. Maybe it might be how efficient is a company at getting projects done from a capital investment perspective. So then it becomes metrics on our spend and on our different capital programs. It might even be performance metrics on how quickly are we reducing cycle times on the shop floor. All those, what are those key performance metrics that we believe as a company at that departmental level, operations, sales, et cetera, keeping the sales pipeline full, keeping turnover down, all those kind of metrics. What are those performance metrics at a departmental level that we believe are important that will influence our overall operating cash flow or whatever our objectives might be, return on capital, EBITDA, whatever they might be, identifying those in terms of what we call a data model and really getting a good, clear picture of what are we going to share with others to be our success metrics that will then say, if we achieve these numbers, if we see those numbers improve, then
we're being successful. Yeah, that's cool. So once you get these performance metrics set up, and I think everybody understands those, I mean, essentially you create a data model from that. So yeah, we could do some reporting off of that. But once we create these performance metrics, how do we hold people accountable to those performance metrics? How do I communicate out to, let's say you're in AP, and I expect one of our business operating models, our business operating system is an AP clerk has to process a certain number of AP invoices in a day, or an AR person doing the same thing. How do I tie that to that individual so they know that what they're doing is going to support the performance metrics?
Yeah. So, I mean, what you're really getting at is how do I tactically put some instruction, I'll call it instruction book of the things that we do to be successful, to achieve those metrics. And typically, we kind of invented this term called service level charter. And you've heard of service level agreements, which basically say, I'm going to provide this service to you, and this is my agreement. I'm going to have this available X amount of hours per day, or I'm going to do a certain level of quality.
Right.
If I'm washing your car, Peter, I'm going to make sure I get all the dirt off of it. And I'm going to wash it once a week. I'm going to get the bugs off of it. All the things that I say I'm going to do for you on your truck, that's my service level agreement to you.
Okay.
So if you imagine taking that down to a department level and saying, use the AP person example, their service level agreement is to get all invoices paid within, or put in the AP system within 2 days.
Within 24. Or 16 business hours. Or
I'm
something
the financial reporting person. I'm going to get management reports to everybody once a week on this date. And so that's a service I'm going to provide for you. We put it in a service level charter where they can sit down and say, we're going to give this report to you once a week by the X date. And by the way, this is how much it's going to cost you to get that to you. And as an operational leader who's getting that service, they might say, I don't need it once a week. I just need it once a month. They go, oh, really? Well, if we only need this report once a month, we can spend less time producing these reports and really focus on the things that you need. And they might say, what I really need is a forecast every week, but it's going to take this many man hours every week to get that forecast to you. Yeah, that's a value to me as an operations manager. So I'm going to want to see some result out of the investment that I put into finance and accounting. A service level might be, we're going to screen people within 24 hours of getting a completed application so that when people need critical staff on site for whatever it might be from an operational perspective, they get screened within 24 hours. And by the way, to be able to do that, we need this many people to do it, and this is how often we're going to do it, and this is the quality expectations out of that. So putting down on paper, what are the key things each department's going to do for each other to support their objectives going forward? And we use the word charter to say it's usually typically a one-page charter. We always force people to keep it on one page so it doesn't become a long something that people don't read.
Okay, so once you finish with the service level charters, at some point you've got to roll all this out, right?
Yeah. So as you start looking at your business operating system and you start looking at all the process improvement vision, you look at the RACI, you look at all the things that need to be done, we recommend our clients put together, we call initiative charters, which is basically a one page of these are the different projects and things we're going to do. When are we going to get them done by? So imagine a one pager and it's got the person's name on it, who's going to do it, what the expected results are going to be, what the milestone, what the due date is, and what's going to cost, what are the benefits, what are the risks, and what are the expectations out of the team members who are involved with that. So then everybody has that initiative or initiatives that they're working on, and they're all in the same format, and they're reported on consistently across the company in kind of more of a portfolio approach of looking at all the things that they need to be done. And then that way they can be prioritized on a consistent basis.
Okay, that's fair. So let me ask you this. So we have, as you said, guiding principles.
That's one.
We've got the process improvement vision. We got the RACI. We have the performance metrics. We have the service level charters, and we have the initiative charters.
That's six.
That's six. That's all six. I got them all. Now, it's not a one-time deal. I mean, I led with that when I introduced this. How do you keep this going? Because business changes, right? I mean, every single day you walk in the door, something is going to change. So how do I, I've got this engine running. How do I keep it running? How do I change the oil? How do I just, keep it trucking along so that as business changes, I don't lose all the benefits of implementing this business operating system?
Yeah, and so there's two pieces of this. One is there's the management of the initiatives that you're going to go do. The second piece of it is having a regular process where you're going through and refreshing those deliverables. So when business events change, so you might sit down and say, okay, every time we have an acquisition, we're going to go through this and see how that impacts our business operating system. Or anytime we open a new plant, what are those events? But then also having a regular
cadence
every 2 years, go through and take a look at what's happening, depending on your industry too. If you're in a rapidly changing dynamic industry such as high tech where things change every day, you might want to go through this every 6 months. And I'm not talking about go through the whole exercise, but having a key person in each department.
Just double check.
Looking through, see what's changed, what's not, report back and make updates. If you're in a more mature industry, you might do it every couple of years.
Okay, so stupid question. Would you just pepper that through your guiding principles so that they're always on the wall and people can't forget?
You would, yeah. You would keep those stuff up. So guiding principles you'd have on your wall. Process improvement vision you'd have out there. And so people walk by and you go, wait a minute.
We just had an acquisition. We're supposed to go back and do this.
Yeah, or somebody might look at that on the wall and going, hey, that doesn't exist anymore.
Let's get rid of it.
Yeah.
We need to revisit.
Yeah, it's the outdated.
So does that mean that you put some sort of governance model around this? I mean, I almost hate to use that term, but we've got to have a governance model around this business operating system to make sure.
You're kind of looking forward, how do you make sure this sticks and it doesn't become just one of those things? That's why it's called an operating system.
Yeah, operating
But I think the other thing to understand is what typically happens out of putting this in the first time is there's a whole bunch of outputs, things that need to be changed that are part of it's already in your business.
Right.
So what I mean by that is you have things like job descriptions, organization charts, policies and procedures. You might even have operating budgets. All those things are going to change as a result of putting in a business operating system. So you need to go through and look at all those things. So I'll give you a perfect example, your RACI. I've seen companies take the RACI and actually turn them sideways, and that becomes job descriptions, where every job description is basically, here's what you're responsible for, here's what you're accountable for, here's what you consult, and this is what you get informed on. And that becomes the foundation for job descriptions. Or even your policies and procedures. Your process improvement vision might drive, what are my company policies?
Right. And I think the big thing there too is, you talk about job descriptions, but by default, you could also change the organization, which is why organization charts are so important from an output perspective. Because once I do a RACI, I may be taking responsibilities and, activities away from one person or one group, one department, and leaving it where it should be, and that could create an org change.
Or you look at somebody's job and you just go, that person's job as an entirety falls into the sales organization, not finance.
Not finance.
So those type of things come out of this for sure. And I think, so really there's the two pieces of this is understanding there needs to be a governance process in place to make sure this is your business operating system's living, breathing document that just doesn't get put on the shelf.
Right.
It becomes something that everybody sees, understands, and it's being used. and getting an inventory of all the outputs that it influences, be it backlog of projects and initiatives, or your policies and procedures, or your control documentation that you use for your audits. Those type of things are going to get influenced by your business operating system. So going back through those
Tools
artifacts
and the artifacts,
and
right.
updating those as part of this process. So typically what we'll see is there'll be someone in each department who's kind of their part-time job is to be kind of the business operating system guru that's there. So when let's say IT finds out that they have to change their operating system based upon some changes in the business, they go visit with the other people who are the business operating system champions within finance,
Right.
HR, sales,
To
operations,
understand how to make it happen.
to make sure that it doesn't influence or change any of the things they need to be doing.
Right. So again, thank you, Bill, for your time. I know we're getting towards the end of our podcast.
Obviously.
Yeah, well, it's kind of abrupt, but
We just were in the middle of talking, and then you just like ready to close this out. Fine, okay, we're done.
done.
Thank you for listening.
No. So all joking aside, so we are going to be pulling together a handbook for all of this. But if folks have questions, who should they reach out
They
to?
should reach out to Peter at Trinergy.com for sure.
Well, yeah, I'll just
Let me
redirect.
go ahead and give him your cell phone number too.
Yeah, then I'll just redirect them to you. But any closing thoughts?
No, I think it's important whether you're a large organization, even a small organization, to have some business operating system in place. I would say if you don't have that as a large organization, what I mean by that is you've got more than 1,000 employees, all over the place, and you've got some complexity to your business, we highly recommend really starting on this endeavor. And it doesn't require a lot of money. This is not talking about putting in new ERP system or anything like that. It's really focused on what are we all about, getting agreement, how we operate so that we can scale as a company and drive value to our stockholders.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bill. Appreciate your time. And
Hey, thank you, Peter, and you have a great day.